I watched my brother bury a body and said nothing for 12 years. Some secrets don't stay buried. No matter how deep you dig, no matter how many years pass, no matter how hard you try to convince yourself you did the right thing. Because eventually, the dirt starts breathing again. And mine? Mine started breathing 12 years later. I was 16 the night my brother killed someone. At least, that's what I believed for most of my life. It happened during the summer of 2013, in a tiny town in northern Montana where everybody knew each other's names, cars, secrets, and mistakes. The kind of town where rumors traveled faster than ambulances. Where people smiled at church on Sunday and destroyed each other quietly Monday through Saturday. My older brother, Mason, was 24 then. To everyone else, he was a hero. Volunteer firefighter. Former high school football star. The guy who helped old women carry groceries without being asked. To me, he was just my brother. The guy who taught me how to throw a punch. How to siphon gas. How to lie to mom when we broke something. But Mason had another side. One nobody talked about. A side that only appeared after midnight. Especially when Dad drank. Our father was a cruel man pretending to be respectable. During the day he ran an auto repair shop. At night he turned into something colder, louder, meaner. He never hit Mason. Only me. And my mother. Mason hated him for that. I think he'd hated him for years. But hatred alone doesn't create monsters. Fear does. The night everything changed started with rain. Hard rain. The kind that rattles windows and makes the world feel isolated. Mom was at her sister's house helping with a medical emergency, leaving just me, Mason, and Dad home alone. I remember sitting in my bedroom with headphones on, trying to drown out the shouting downstairs. But then I heard glass break. And silence after that. Not normal silence. The dangerous kind. I walked downstairs slowly. Every step felt wrong. Like my body already knew something terrible had happened before my mind could catch up. The kitchen light flickered above the sink. Dad was on the floor. Blood spread across the tiles beneath his head. Mason stood over him breathing hard, holding a metal wrench. I froze. I couldn't breathe. Couldn't think. Dad's eyes were open, but empty. Mason, I whispered. He looked at me like he'd just woken from a nightmare. Then he dropped the wrench. I didn't mean to, he said immediately. Over and over again. I didn't mean to. I didn't mean to. But dead is dead. Intentions stopped mattering after that. I should have called the police. That's what normal people do. But I wasn't normal anymore. Because when I looked at Dad lying there, part of me felt relieved. And that terrified me more than the blood. Mason grabbed my shoulders. Listen to me carefully, he said. His voice is suddenly calm. Too calm. If they find out, Mom loses everything. The house. The shop. Everything. I stared at him in shock. He was hurting us, Mason whispered. You know what he was. I did know. But murder still felt impossible. Unreal. Like something from a movie that couldn't possibly belong to our lives. Then Mason asked me to help him. And God forgive me, said yes. We wrapped Dad's body in an old tarp from the garage. I remember every detail. The smell of gasoline. Rainwater dripping through the back door. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the flashlight. We loaded the body into Dad's pickup truck around midnight. Nobody saw us leave. At least, I don't think they did. Mason drove deep into the woods near Black Pine Road, about 20 miles outside town. There was an old hunting area out there that nobody visited anymore. The rain had turned the ground soft. Easy to dig. That's the part one can never forget. The sound of the shovel. Wet dirt. Heavy breathing. Thunder overhead. And Dad's boot was sticking partially out of the tarp while we lowered him into the hole. I threw up beside a tree. Mason kept digging. Neither of us spoke. Not once. When it was done, he covered the grave completely and scattered dead branches over the soil. Then we drove home in silence. By morning, Dad was officially missing. The police searched for weeks. They thought maybe he'd run off after a fight with Mom. Some people believed he had gambling debts. Others thought he'd started another family somewhere. Small towns invent stories when the truth disappears. And eventually, everyone stopped looking. Except me. Because I never escaped that night. Not really. Over the next 12 years, Mason transformed into exactly the kind of man our father pretended to be. Respected, trusted, admired. He got married, had 2 daughters, started his own construction company. Meanwhile, I became the opposite. Quiet, anxious, paranoid. I barely slept. Every time someone knocked at my door unexpectedly, I thought it was the police. Every time I saw a shovel, my stomach turned. I started drinking heavily in my 20s. Then pills. Then gambling. It's funny. The guilty person often looks less suspicious than the witness. Mason slept peacefully. I drowned slowly. And the worst part? I still loved him. Because despite everything, he had protected us. Hadn't he? That's the lie I repeated constantly. He saved us. He had no choice. Dad deserved it. But deep down, another thought kept clawing its way back. What if I never really knew my brother at all? The first crack appeared 12 years later. Last October. Mom died from a stroke. At the funeral, people kept talking about family, loyalty, strength. Mason stood beside me wearing a black suit, comforting relatives like some grieving saint. And suddenly I couldn't stand looking at him anymore. Because I realized something horrifying. He never once cried for Dad. Not once in 12 years. Not guilt, not grief, nothing. That night after the funeral, Mason invited me over for drinks. His wife had taken the kids to her parents' house, so it was just us sitting on the back porch while cold wind moved through the trees. For a while we talked about normal things. Bills. Then he looked at me and said something that changed my life forever. You still think about that night, don't you? I nearly dropped my glass. I asked him what he meant even though we both knew. He stared into the darkness. I can tell, he said quietly. You've never been the same. Neither had he. But not in the same way. I finally asked the question I'd buried for 12 years. Did you really not mean to kill him? Mason didn't answer immediately. That silence told me everything before he even opened his mouth. Then he smiled. Not a happy smile. A tired one. And he said, I hit him harder than I needed to. I felt ice move through my body. You planned it? No, he replied calmly. But when it happened, I didn't stop myself either. I couldn't breathe. For 12 years I'd convinced myself we survived an accident. But now, it sounded like murder. Intentional murder. Mason took another sip of whiskey. You know what he did to Mom before you came downstairs that night? He asked. I shook my head slowly. He told her he was going to kill her someday. The wind howled through the yard. I didn't know if Mason was telling the truth anymore. Maybe he was. Maybe he wasn't. That's the problem with secrets. After enough years, everything becomes unreliable. Then he leaned closer to me and whispered something I will hear for the rest of my life. You know what the worst part is? I couldn't answer. He wasn't dead when we buried him. The world stopped. Every sound vanished. I stared at him, waiting for him to laugh. To say it was a sick joke. But he didn't. He woke up in the truck, Mason continued softly. Barely conscious. Couldn't talk right. But he was alive. I felt physically sick. No. I heard him moving under the tarp. My chest tightened so hard I thought I might collapse. You buried him alive? Mason finally looked directly at me. And for the first time in my life, I saw pure evil in my brother's face. He would have destroyed us if I hadn't. I stumbled backward from the porch. My entire memory shattered instantly. All these years, I wasn't covering up manslaughter. I was helping conceal something far worse. And Mason had let me carry that guilt beside him for 12 years. On purpose. I left his house without another word. He didn't stop me. Didn't chase me. Because I think he already knew what came next. I didn't sleep that night. At sunrise, I drove out to Black Pine Road for the first time since 2013. The woods looked smaller somehow. Older. But I found the spot almost immediately. Trauma remembers directions better than love does. The branches were gone. The earth is uneven now after years of weather and decay. I stood there shaking. Then I started digging. Part of me didn't even know why. Maybe I needed proof. Maybe I needed punishment. After 2 hours, my shovel hit something solid. Not bone. Metal. I uncovered an old rusted toolbox. Inside it were Dad's wallet, his watch, and something else. A cassette tape. I drove home trembling and found an old player in my garage. The tape crackled when it started. Then I heard my father's voice. We panicked. Can I sit to these? I stopped breathing. I won't tell anyone. Static filled the recording. Then Mason's voice answered calmly. You should have treated us better. I heard crying, begging, dirt moving, and then screaming. Real screaming. The tape ended abruptly. I vomited in my kitchen sink. Because suddenly the truth became undeniable. My brother hadn't protected us. He had executed our father. Slowly. And somehow he recorded it. I almost went straight to the police. Almost. But fear is a strange addiction. Once it owns you long enough, freedom starts feeling dangerous. For 3 days I kept the tape hidden while deciding what to do. Then Mason showed up at my apartment, unannounced. He looked exhausted, like he already knew. "I wondered when you'd go back there," he said quietly. I asked him why he recorded it. His answer still haunts me. Because I wanted him to feel powerless for once. There was no remorse in his voice. None. Only justification. Then he noticed the tape recorder on my table. And his expression changed instantly. Not panic. Acceptance. He sat down slowly and rubbed his face. "You gonna turn me in?" I looked at my brother, the man who protected me from beatings, taught me baseball, helped pay my rent when I lost jobs, and also buried a living man underground. How do you separate those two people? Can you? I asked him one final question. "Did you ever feel guilty?" He thought about it carefully. And said, "No. But I regret involving you." And somehow, that hurt most of all, because it meant my suffering had been real to him, just not Dad's. The next morning, I went to the sheriff's department with the tape. Mason was arrested 2 days later. His wife filed for divorce within a month. His daughters stopped visiting. And the town? The town turned against me immediately. Not him. Some people called me brave. Most called me a traitor. Because small towns forgive murder faster than betrayal. Especially when the victim was already hated. Mason eventually confessed to second-degree murder as part of a plea deal. The investigators recovered Dad's remains exactly where we buried him. Exactly where I helped bury him. I testified in court. Every second felt like tearing my own skin off. The last time I saw Mason was after sentencing. 25 years. He looked older already. Before deputies led him away, he turned toward me and said, "You know he would have killed Mom eventually." Maybe he was right. Maybe he wasn't. But here's what I finally understand after all these years. Stopping evil doesn't give you permission to become evil yourself. And silence? Silence is its own kind of grave. I spent 12 years burying the truth beside my father. And the worst part is, some nights, I still miss my brother. Because monsters aren't always strangers. They're the people who loved you first.